Howdy, friends, and shalom, and thank you for joining us here on this episode of The Watchdog, exclusively on the Synagogue News. I am your host, CJ Cox, here to tell you that we are indeed living in biblical times. Got a very interesting program for you guys today, I do declare. I recently found Xi Jinping's, or Xi, or however you say his name, I don't care, he's an idiot anyways, full address to the Davos agenda at the World Economic Forum, which is those guys behind the Great Reset. So we're going to actually read that address in full today. Very interesting stuff, I think, when we have virtual Adolf Hitler talking to virtual Bond villain meeting. Certainly stuff that we need to be aware of, no doubt. But nonetheless, that's a big portion of what we're going to be talking about today, if not all of it. We'll see if we end up getting to anything else. Appreciate anybody who is here. Want to very quickly go through our channel housekeeping. So if you are here, please remember to like and share this video. Please consider subscribing to the channel if you have not done so. Hit that bell to get notified every time that we go live. And of course, you can follow us on various social media platforms. Get this out first off to any of those platforms you frequent. But second off, while you're there, maybe consider following your boy on those platforms. You can find me at the tag of the Synagogue. I am on MeWe. I am on Gab. I am on Parler, Facebook, Twitter, and Minds. And I have a special recommendation to give to you guys as far as Gab, Minds, and Parler are concerned, and MeWe as well, because they are alternative social media platforms which do, in fact, attempt to defend our internet free speech. The best way, I think, to actually beat internet censorship is no doubt to use the alternative social media platforms. It's not to ask the state for help. It's not to trust these government buddy agencies, right? Well, I guess they're not government agencies, but they're buddy with government is what I'm trying to say, right? Facebook and Twitter and all that, right? Rather, the best way to actually win your internet free speech back is to use alternative social media platforms. So if you're on Twitter, get on Gab. If you're on Twitter, get on Parler. If you're on Facebook, get on MeWe. If you're on YouTube, get on Rumble. There's no reason not to. And by the way, if you like this program, you really need to get on Rumble because there's a huge possibility that videos will be taken down. Videos have already been taken down in the past. And who knows how long we actually have to give you conservative content here on YouTube. So definitely consider going to Rumble and liking the Synagogue there. It is just the Synagogue there, not the Synagogue News. For whatever reason, they won't actually let me change the display name on the Synagogue. I don't really know, or on the Rumble account, excuse me. I don't really know why. It seems like a really easy thing to add, and I don't see any reason not to have it. But anyways, it is just the Synagogue there. We don't post the religious content there. We only post the Watchdog, and I certainly would appreciate anybody who wants to check it out. Who do we have in the live chat so far? Let's go ahead and acknowledge them. I see Kevin's Biblical Discussions. Shalom, thank you very much for being here. Says, I would like to talk to you about some things that were said the other night. I am not aware of what you are talking about as far as which other night or where, but nonetheless, we could certainly talk about some stuff like that. And thank you for being here. Richard Neal is also here. Shalom, and thank you very much for being here. And Chris Lucas, Live Shows and Collins, also here. Thank you very much for being here. I appreciate every single one of you guys. And anybody else who was here as well, please remember to like and share the video. And let's get right into this. By the way, friends, if anybody has questions for me, this very rarely does end up actually manifesting. But if any of you guys have questions for me over the course of this, tag me at the Synagogue News, and we will answer any questions at the end of the program. It's something we've been doing now every now and then. For the most part, we don't tend to get questions, but it just helps me to not be distracted by the live chat. So if you guys have questions, tag me at the Synagogue News, and then we'll just answer them at the end rather than addressing them in the middle of, the middle of these conversations. And yeah, we're going to go ahead and jump right into this. So we got some very interesting stuff to talk about, I think. The very first thing I want to talk about before we jump in is the election. Midterm elections are coming up in less than 3 months at this point. I think it's November the 8th is when we're actually going to have the election taking place, if I remember correctly. So that's something like 2.5 months from now. If you have a candidate who you believe is a solid defender of conservatism, of our Christian heritage, of liberty, of the Constitution, I think it is imperative for you to get your butt out there and vote. A lot of people are saying things like, well, what does it matter? What does it matter? They're just going to steal it. What does it matter? In national elections, that might be true. I would like to believe it's not true. It might be true. Only the Lord knows whether or not we're ever going to have a meaningful national election again, right? But in these local elections, for senators, for representatives, for governors, it is much, much, much more difficult for people to actually, what's the word I'm looking here? Create fraud. There's a word in particular that I'm looking for that's fleeting me. In these elections, right? It's a lot more difficult to steal these elections, is the point that I'm trying to get at, because of the differences in how votes are allocated in a national election versus a local election, right? In national elections, you really need to just steal a couple of squeeze spots, right? So, for example, in 2020, the entire election really came down to probably about 5 states. You could say Pennsylvania, Florida, Georgia, Arizona, and lastly would probably be, you could kind of add a couple in this last category, but I would go with Wisconsin, and the other one that people would potentially talk about would be Michigan, right? So there's 50 states in the union, and those 5, potentially 6 states are really where the entire election comes down to, right? Because certain states, Alabama, Idaho, Texas, South Dakota, Alaska, those are red states. It's just going to happen. It's just the way it is. And other states, Massachusetts, Virginia, California, those are just blue states. Once again, it's just the way it is. Nothing's going to change it, right? But when it comes to these local elections, that's not actually true. You can't just win a couple of squeeze spots. You can't just win a couple of pressure points and then consider yourself to have won the entire election, right? Most of the areas in your local state that you could potentially, quote unquote, steal, I say quote unquote steal just because, nobody really knows what happened. We just know that it's really funky and we don't really trust it, right? But nonetheless, any of the potential areas that somebody could steal, I'll just use my own Idaho as an example, right? Coeur d'Alene and Boise are areas where you have a lot of big party overreach, but those places are blue already. So, you're going to steal basically nothing there, right? If anything, the only thing you have is a possibility that they might go red, but they're already firmly blue. There's no reason to steal them, right? And it's the same way with most other areas. You go to a place like Oregon, for example. Portland is, of course, very blue. Salem is very blue. And the rest of the state is very red. And as a result, that makes it very difficult for you to actually take an election by going to these pressure points and just simply stealing that one individual area, a couple thousand ballots here and there, maybe even a couple hundred ballots here and there. Now, we are at a crossroads in this country. And we've been at a crossroads for quite some time, but we're getting closer and closer to the point where the crossroads will be passed. We are at a crossroads where we are very genuinely fighting for the possibility that our nation continues to exist as a functional republic or continues to exist as the most powerful nation in the world. This United States of America is the only nation in the entire history of this planet where genuine freedom of speech, where genuine freedom of religion, where genuine right to form militia and bear arms, and all these other things has actually been codified in such a way that you cannot violate these liberties. I know a lot of people like to say, oh, the rest of the West has freedom too, right? But everybody just needs to look up something like Pastor Coates or Pastor Pulowski up in Canada, or Tommy Robinson up in Britain, right? Or what goes on with Messianic Jews in Israel. All you need to do is just look at these cases to have demonstrated before your very eyes that we are indeed the only country that has ever existed where genuine freedom is a thing. And that is not something that is guaranteed to us. First off, it is the blessings of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and he has the right to take it away anytime he sees fit. Second off, it is something that we need to maintain here, and we need to maintain it in various different ways. We need to maintain it by having a strong fourth pillar, as they call it, which would be media, what you're listening to right now. We need to maintain it by electing good, honest candidates. Of course, sometimes we need to maintain it by way of war when we have somebody who is threatening our freedoms, such as the case in, like World War II or something like that. We need to maintain these sorts of things, right? We need to maintain these sorts of things. And the only way that we're going to actually accomplish that is by making sure we are voting for the good candidates. A lot of these good candidates have already lost because the primary session is over. That's sad, but it is true. But not all of them. So if you have somebody in your area who is an obvious improvement over the other, who is an obvious improvement over what you have now, who is somebody who will defend your liberties, defend our Christian heritage, defend the Constitution, vote for them. Do it. Don't forget. Don't push it off till later. I got better things to do. It doesn't matter anyways. Vote for them. There's one way and one way only that this nation will be repaired as far as the practical nature. There's one way and one way only as far as the spiritual nature. We need revival. But as far as the practical nature, there is also likewise one way, and that way is that you start to give a damn about politics. Vote, 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 vote. By the way, if you're in Idaho, Ammon Bundy for governor 2022. I think he's probably the best candidate that we've had in this state, at least since I moved here back in 2012. And, that's saying something because we've had some pretty solid candidates here like Russ Fulcher and Rojo Labrador. But I digress. Just wanted to remind you guys, we need to vote. We absolutely, positively, beyond any shadow of a doubt, need to vote. And I don't think there's any question about it. So let's get to what we're going to read here today. We're going to be reading Winnie the Flu's entire address to the Davos agenda, which again is at the World Economic Forum. It happened a couple months ago at this point. I just recently found it. And the World Economic Forum, for those who don't know, is that group that is behind the Great Reset, right? That group that is led by Klaus Schwab, or Schwab, however you say his last name. And this is an agenda from potentially the most evil man on the planet to potentially the most evil group on the planet. So I thought it was definitely very interesting, something that was worthy of our reading. Now, like I said, it was a while back. I think at this point, probably like half a year. Actually, I can see the article. The article date here says January 17th, so a little bit over half a year. But nonetheless, not a lot of people have heard it. I hadn't heard it until recently, and so I want to share with you guys what was said here so that we have a good idea of what is coming in the future. So this is Winnie the Flu, otherwise known as Xi Jinping, otherwise known as the Grand Pooh Bear. This guy right here, probably the most evil dirtbag on the entire planet, potentially, who knows. And this is his full address to the Davos agenda, the group behind the Great Reset. All right. Professor Klaus Schwab, ladies and gentlemen, friends, greetings to you all. It is my pleasure to attend this virtual session of the World Economic Forum. In 2 weeks' time, 2 weeks, of course, from January the 17th, in 2 weeks' time, China will celebrate the advent of spring and the Lunar New Year, the Year of the Tiger. In Chinese culture, tiger symbolizes bravery and strength, as the Chinese people often refer to spirited dragon and dynamic tiger, or soaring dragon and leaping tiger. To meet the severe challenges facing humanity, we must add wings to the tiger and act with the courage and strength of the tiger to overcome all obstacles on our way forward. We must do everything necessary to clear the shadow of the pandemic and boost economic and social recovery and development so that the sunshine of hope may light up the future of humanity. Now, as we pause for a minute from this article, I think it's important for us to remember that this pandemic came from China, right? This pandemic originated in China. There are many people who believe it may have leaked from a lab in China. Now, I think that the whole thing was overblown to begin with, but just ignoring that potential possibility there of everything being overblown to begin with, we still have the problem of this was all China's fault to begin with. And China has thus far had absolutely no penalties, absolutely no punishment. They have given little to no retribution whatsoever to try and fix this problem. But now apparently they're going to recommend that all of us are going to listen to them to have this problem fixed. Even though, obviously at this point it's basically a non-problem anyways. Nonetheless, rambling. Let's continue. The world today is undergoing major changes unseen in a century. I imagine he's probably referencing the Industrial Revolution when he says in a century. But who knows? The world is undergoing major changes unseen in a century. These changes, not limited to a particular moment, event, country, or region, represent the profound and sweeping changes of our times. As changes of these times combine with the once-in-a-century pandemic, the world finds itself in a new period of turbulence and transformation. How to beat the pandemic and how to build the post-COVID world. I'm going to say that again. He says not just how to beat the pandemic, but also how to build the post-COVID world. So Winnie the Flu here is going to be an integral part of building the post-COVID world. Now, is this the same Winnie the Flu who started this whole thing? Is this the same Winnie the Flu who is currently torturing Christians and Falun Gong and Muslims in concentration camps? Is this the same Winnie the Flu who is threatening to invade Taiwan, who has cracked down on the freedoms that are the small amount of freedoms, but nonetheless the freedoms that are allowed in Hong Kong? Well, yes, and yes. All of those things. The answer is yes. But don't let that fool you. He's really a super nice guy, and he's going to help us build the post-COVID world. Hope you guys can hear the sarcasm in my voice. These are major issues of common concern to people around the world. There are also major urgent questions we must give answers to. As a Chinese saying goes, the momentum of the world either flourishes or declines. The state of the world either progresses or regresses. That's the end of the proverb, by the way. The world is always, developing through the movement of contradictions. Without contradiction, nothing would exist. The history of humanity is a history of achieving growth by meeting various tests and of developing by overcoming various crises. We need to move forward by following the logic of historical progress and develop by riding the tide of development of our times. Notwithstanding all vicissitudes, humanity will move on. We need to learn from comparing long history cycles and see the changes in things through the subtle and minute. Excuse me, I have a little bit of stuff in my throat. We need to foster new opportunities amidst crises, open up new horizons on a shifting landscape, and pool great strength to go through difficulties and challenges. So he's going to tell us how to do that. How do you guys think we're going to do that? By the way, if you're guessing anything that might potentially maybe, I don't know, kind of sort of sound like it's relating to what the modern day woke people in America want to do, well, you may or may not see the future of this article. First, we need to embrace cooperation and jointly defeat the pandemic, he says. Again, we need to embrace cooperation and jointly defeat the pandemic, he says. So right off the bat, what do we have here? We have Winnie the Flu saying that we actually need to have a greater global governance, right? That's what they mean by embrace cooperation. They mean cooperation between the nations. And of course, we know we're listening to somebody speak to the Davos agenda, as well as the man who runs the largest police state in the entire world. So clearly what he is referencing here is not just simply cooperating as good neighbors, but cooperating as a global government, as a new world order, one might say. Also, he says we need to jointly defeat this pandemic. Now, of course, the pandemic has already been defeated, and it was already overblown to begin with, but that doesn't bode very well for the agenda. Now, does it? No, it does not. See, the agenda would like there to be a constant, nonstop, never-ending disease, never-ending pandemic, right? Because that allows them to continue to push forward all of these nonsensical and grossly tyrannical measures, such as forcing you to wear masks, such as forcing you to socially distance, such as shutting down churches and other places that are not deemed essential, such as telling you what you can and cannot believe, from certain experts in the medical field, and so on and so forth, such as potentially forcing you to get a vaccine and potentially even forcing you to get a digital ID that records all of your health information. These are the kinds of things that they can't push forward if there isn't an ongoing pandemic. You see what I'm saying? So they need the pandemic to continue. And by the way, as we're here in the month of August, this is August 24th, 2022, as we're here in the month of August, we're now probably all familiar with the growing, monkeypox craze. Will it get to the point of the COVID-19 craze? Nobody knows yet, but there's certainly a reason why they are pushing the monkeypox craze. And it's the same reason they pushed the COVID-19 craze. It allows them to get power. It allows them to push through absolutely nonsensical and grossly tyrannical measures that track your every move, that tell you when you can and can't celebrate, when you can and can't worship, when you can and can't gather with your friends and family, that cause panic, that force you to listen only to quote unquote accurate sources, reliable sources, as that god-awful show on Certainly Not News is titled, though it has since been canceled. They need pandemics in order for their tyranny to thrive. They need something that is a quote-unquote emergency in order for their tyranny to thrive. And don't think for a second that Winnie the Pooh doesn't mean to say this, because he certainly does. What I mean by that is, don't think for a second that we're reading into his words and that he doesn't mean what I say he means. He certainly does. He has made it very clear with the fact that he has millions of people in actual concentration camps. And by the way, just so you guys are aware, we don't currently know how bad it is in China. We won't know probably until Winnie the Pooh is dead. We won't know probably until the Grand Pooh Bear is a figure of history. While he's a figure of the contemporary present, it is not possible for us to know how many millions he's potentially killed. But rest assured, it is almost assuredly millions. You don't have 2 million Muslims in concentration camps, 1.5 million Falun Gong in concentration camps, and God knows how many millions of Christians in concentration camps, and somehow avoid Holocaust levels of death. We don't know about those Holocaust levels of death yet because it's contemporary history, or contemporary reality, I guess you could say. It's the present, right? However, eventually, this will be history. Eventually, we will be looking back on this, reading it in our textbooks, and when we do, you mark my words, we will be looking at this man as a mass murderer of millions, right up there with Joseph Stalin, with Leopold II, with Adolf Hitler, with Mao Zedong. Mark my words. Back to the address. Confronted by the once-in-a-century pandemic, which is not true, by the way, the 1957 flu pandemic was actually worse, and the 1918 flu pandemic was actually worse. And that would be, if you count this, that would be 3 different pandemics. And then there's, of course, plenty of other things that we could mention, like AIDS, like Ebola, like the swine flu, like the bird flu, like SARS, etc. Etc. Right? We could just go on. The whole idea that this is once in a century is just part of the propaganda. But at any rate, back to the address. Confronted by the once-in-a-century pandemic, which will affect the future of humanity, the international community has fought a tenacious battle. Facts have shown once again that amidst the raging torrents of a global crisis, countries are not riding separately in some 190 small boats, but are rather all on a giant ship on which our shared destiny hinges. There again is that language that we are going to have to be united as one nation, or at least as one cooperating unit. Small boats may not survive a storm, but a giant ship is strong enough to brave a storm. Thanks to the concerted efforts of the international community, major progress has been made in the global fight against the pandemic. That said, the pandemic is proving a protracted one, resurging with more variants and spreading faster than before. It poses a serious threat to people's safety and health and exerts a profound impact on the global economy. Remember, this is in January of 2022, so some of the stuff that he's talking about we have already seen. Strong confidence and cooperation represents the only right way to defeat the pandemic. Remember, strong confidence, confidence in who? That would be confidence in your leaders and confidence in the accepted experts. And cooperation, cooperation between whom? That would be international cooperation between nations, which will usually take the form of something like the United Nations, the European Union, the World Council of Churches, the World Economic Forum, the World Alliance of Religions for Peace, etc. Strong confidence cooperation represents the only right way to defeat the pandemic. Holding each other back or shifting blame would only cause needless delay in response and distract us from the overall objective. Notice he doesn't want us to be shifting quote unquote blame because he knows that he is to blame for whatever pandemic does actually happen to exist. Countries need to strengthen international cooperation against COVID-19, carry out active cooperation on research and development of medicines, jointly build multiple lines of defense against the coronavirus, and speed up efforts to build a global community of health for all. Again, build a global community. Guys, this is not InfoWars. This is not Israeli News Live. This is not, hey, the world is going to end.com, right? This is not the coronavirus vaccine is the mark of the beast 666.net. This is the World Economic Forum's website, and this is the official address that Winnie the Flu, Xi Jinping is his real name, gave to the World Economic Forum at the Davos agenda. We are not in the realm of conspiracy theory anymore. This is just simply what they want. They fully admit it. They fully admit it. We turned a corner in 2020. It used to be that New World Order, the global governance, the things of that nature were nothing more than the crazy crackpot conspiracy theories of Alex Jones. But it's 2022 now, and this is just simply mainstream news, even though nobody's talking about it. Global community. He wants to build a global community of health for all. Of particular importance is to fully leverage vaccines as a powerful weapon. Let me say that again. This is a quote from Xi Jinping. Of particular importance is to fully leverage vaccines as a powerful weapon, ensure their equitable distribution, quicken vaccination, and close the global immunization gap so as to truly safeguard people's lives, health, and livelihoods. China is a country that delivers on its promises. China has already sent over 2 billion doses of vaccines to more than 120 countries and international organizations. By the way, you just had blatant admission from the president of China that a lot of these vaccines are Chinese. So when people try to tell you, no, sorry, that's conspiracy theory, you can tell them to take that up with the literal leader of China and the World Economic Forum, whom he speaks to. Still, China will provide another 1 billion doses to African countries, including 600 million doses as donation, and we will also, donate 150 million doses to Asian countries, which I believe that is, I guess I'm not sure what that stands for. Let me go ahead and look that up real quick so that I can inform you guys as to what exactly he's talking about there. ASEAN countries means Association of Southeast Asian Nations. So that would be Brunei, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, Malaysia, Myanmar, the Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam. A bunch of countries that are just right off the coast or right bordering China. depending on if they're, the island nations or not. So now we know. Back to the agenda, he says, second, we need to resolve various risks and promote steady recovery of the world economy. The world economy is emerging from the depths, yet it still faces many constraints. Now, of course, remember, they are the ones who have actually forced these constraints on the world economy. They're the ones who shut down international trade. They're the ones who shut down all these private businesses. They're the ones who basically turned our economy off. They're the ones who printed billions, if not trillions of dollars, thus inflating all of the world's currencies. But now they're going to fix the problem that, of course, they caused. And it's kind of like back to that whole Incredibles thing. If you guys have ever seen the Pixar movie, The Incredibles, the main villain, Syndrome, creates a robot to go and attack the city, right? Having gotten rid of all the supers. And since he's gotten rid of all the supers, and since he has control of the robot, he's going to be able to go into the city and save all the people by defeating the robot, thus having himself put up on a pedestal in the eyes of all the people as the man who had saved the world and saved the day and saved everybody's lives and blah, 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 blah. But he caused the problem, right? Could use another fictional example in the case of Star Wars. If you're familiar with Star Wars, the Chancellor of the Great Republic, Palpatine, who is secretly the Dark Lord Darth Sidious, is commanding the Confederacy of Independent Systems, which wishes to secede from this Grand Republic, right? Thus forcing the Republic to get an army and forcing them to give him emergency powers. But again, he's the one who caused the problem. It's the same thing that we have here, friends. These guys are the ones who caused, and not just Xi Jinping, but the world international leaders. These guys are the ones who caused the economy to go kaput in the first place. But now that the economy is kaput, and since we have a world full of a bunch of goldfish, meaning people with absolutely no attention span whatsoever, they're going to fix the problem and everybody's just going to forget about it. And we're going to put them up on a pedestal. Oh, they saved us all from the great and dreaded coronavirus. They saved us all from the economy being in shambles. Of course, we forget that they're the ones who caused the pandemic. Of course, we forget that they're the ones who caused the economy to be in shambles. It's a trick that never fails because, unfortunately, people are never intelligent. God gave us these absolutely amazing brains, and we decide to use them to record football stats and say, hey, we've been the #1 shooter in freaking Call of Duty. Not to say that that's not a cool accomplishment, but still, guys, come on. Back to the agenda. The global industrial and supply chains have been disrupted by the international governments. Commodity prices continue to rise, thanks to the international governments. Energy supply remains tight, thanks to the international governments. These risks compound one another and heighten the uncertainty about economic recovery. The global low inflation environment has notably changed, and the risks of inflation driven by multiple factors are surfacing. I wonder what those factors might be. Is it possible that on top of the fact that we've had a dead monetary system for quite some time, right? Ever since 1913, when the Federal Reserve Act was passed, we basically have had money that was declared so by fiat, right? And this is something that Congressman Ron Paul used to warn about quite a bit. What we mean by declared money by fiat is basically they decided these Federal Reserve banknotes are money, and so we all just kind of accepted, since the state decided this is money, that in fact it is money, right? But of course, that's all an illusion. It's not real. It's fake. It's just a piece of paper. I could use it as toilet paper. I could use it to start a fire. I could use it to write on. You know what I can't use it for? Anything of actual value. And the inflation is being started, by the way, because of the fact that they continuously print this money nonstop. In fact, fun fact for you guys, 60% of all dollars that exist right now have been printed since 2020. You go to the local supermarket, you say, hey, I can only give you the prices for here in Idaho. You say, hey, this milk is over $3. I remember in 2020 when this milk was less than $1.50. Why did it increase by over 100%? Well, because the amount of dollars in circulation has increased by over 100%. It's called inflation, and the state caused it. But now the state is going to say, hey, forget all that, ignore the man behind the curtain, pay no attention whatsoever to what has happened in the past. We'll fix the problem for you. And all those guys over there who were saying we started the problem to begin with, they're just crazy conspiracy theorists, and we'll have them shut down anyways. Nonsense. If major economies slam on the brakes or take a U-turn in their monetary policies, there would be serious negative spillovers. This is back to the address here. They would present challenges to global economic and financial stability, and developing countries would bear the brunt of it. In the context of ongoing COVID-19 response, we need to explore new drivers of economic growth, new modes of social life, and new pathways for people-to-people exchange in a bid to facilitate cross-border trade, keep industrial and supply chains secure, and promote steady and solid progress in global economic recovery. I'd like to emphasize here one of the things that he says. He doesn't just say new drivers of economic growth and all that stuff, but new modes of social life, new pathways for people-to-people exchange. What do you think that means? Well, considering this is an agenda given to the World Economic Forum, who wants us to drink roach milk, and eat cricket meal, I think we know what they mean by new modes of social life. Economic globalization is the trend of the times. Indeed it is. Indeed it is. Can't disagree with old Winnie there. Economic globalization is the trend of the times. Though countercurrents are sure to exist in a river, none could stop it from flowing to the sea. Driving forces bolster the river's momentum, and resistance may yet enhance its flow. Despite the countercurrents and dangerous shoals along the way, economic globalization has never and will never veer off course. He says has never and will never veer off course. In other words, those America First junkies, Israel First junkies, Britain First junkies, you guys may think you're accomplishing something, but us who control everything will make sure that you, in fact, are not taking us off course. Countries around the world should uphold true multilateralism. Remember a year ago when Antonio Guterres, the current General Secretary of the United Nations, said that he lamented the fact that we did not have an ability for the United Nations to enforce its multilateral policies. And he said he wanted to see a new United Nations with teeth. Direct quote. You remember that? Well, Xi Jinping agrees, as you've been able to see here. We should remove barriers, not erect walls. I wonder who he might be speaking about. We should open up, not close off. We should seek integration, not decoupling. This is the way to build an open world economy. We should guide reforms of the global governance system with the principle of fairness and justice, funny coming from Xi Jinping, and uphold the multilateral trading systems with the World Trade Organization at its center, which is another incredibly corrupt political organization. We should make generally acceptable and effective rules for artificial intelligence and digital economy on the basis of full consultation and create an open, just, and non-discriminatory environment for scientific and technological innovation. This is the way to make economic globalization more open, inclusive, balanced, and beneficial for all, and to fully unleash the vitality of the world economy. A couple things we want to note here. Number one, notice that he parrots the same language that wokies here in the United States parrot. We want globalization. It's inevitable. We want to be more inclusive. We want to make sure we're balanced for all this other kind of stuff, right? Non-discriminatory, all these other kind of buzzwords that you're used to hearing. But notice also that these things that people swear up and down are actually going to help us fend off things like globalization, fend off things like world governance, fend off things like police state tyranny. Xi Jinping is totally down with digital economy, that's cryptocurrency, That's ordering stuff off of Amazon. That's making sure that Google is your one-stop shop for any information you want. And artificial intelligence. I don't think I need to explain that one. You all know what artificial intelligence is. You've seen Star Wars, you've seen the Terminator, right? A common understanding among us, let me go ahead and scroll down. A common understanding among us is that to turn the world economy from crisis to recovery, it is imperative to strengthen macro policy coordination. Major economies should see the world as one community. I'm going to say that again. Major economies, says Winnie the Flu to the Davos Forum, who pushes the Great Reset. Major economies should see the world as one community. Global governance is just a conspiracy theory. New World Order is just the machinations of the mind of Alex Jones, right? Wrong. Major economies should see the world as one community, he says. Think in a more systemic way, increase policy transparency and information sharing, and coordinate the objectives, intensity, and pace of fiscal and monetary policies so as to prevent the world economy from plummeting again. Major developed countries should adopt responsible economic policies, manage policy spillovers, and avoid severe impacts on developing countries. International economic and financial institutions should play their constructive role to pool global consensus, enhance policy synergy, and prevent systemic risks. This is the dictator of China telling the World Economic Forum that he thinks we should all have one world government, and it's literally mainstream news. Nobody talking about it. Third, we need to bridge the development divide and revitalize global development. The process of global development is suffering from severe disruption, entailing more outstanding problems like a widening north-south gap, divergent recovery trajectories, development fault lines, and a technological divide. The Human Development Index has declined for the first time in 30 years. By the way, remember who caused that? The world's governments caused that. They shut everything down. They stopped production. They shut down businesses. They inflated economy. But again, just like Syndrome in The Incredibles, they're going to now fix the problem that they caused so that you all call them hero. The world's poor population has increased by more than 100 million. And again, who caused that? Nearly 800 million people live in hunger. And again, who caused that? Difficulties are mounting in food security, education, employment, medicine, health, and other areas important to people's livelihoods. You already know what I'm going to say. Who caused it? Definitely wasn't Donald Trump. Definitely wasn't Ammon Bundy. It definitely wasn't C.J. Cox on the synagogue. No, it was the leaders of these international bodies. People like Winnie the Flu. Some developing countries have fallen back into poverty and instability due to the pandemic. Right, quote unquote, due to the pandemic. It's the pandemic's fault. You see, COVID-19 just really doesn't like it when you have money. So it likes to go in and take all your money and give it to rich people who happen to hang out in Beijing, China. I wonder who I could be referencing. But it's all COVID-19's fault. Those guys in Beijing, they had nothing to do with it. Many developed countries are also living through a hard time. Gonna have a bad time. The economy pizza instead of French fried. If you know, you know. No matter what difficulties may come our way, we must adhere to a people-centered philosophy of development, place development and livelihoods front and center in global macro policies, realize the UN's 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and build greater synergy among existing mechanisms of development cooperation to promote balanced development worldwide. I mean, honestly, if I was a James Bond screenwriter in 1960, I couldn't make this speech up if I tried. We need to uphold the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities, promote international cooperation on climate change. Yes, China is going to tell us about climate change. They have literal smog storms in their cities that cover the entire area with black, thick smoke. But he's going to tell all of us about how we need to fight climate change. Makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? In fact, you're racist for thinking it doesn't. We need to uphold the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities, promote international cooperation on climate change in the context of development, and implement the outcomes of COP26 to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Developed economies should take the lead in honoring their emissions reduction responsibilities, except for China, of course, deliver on their commitment of financial and technological support, and create the necessary conditions for developing countries to address climate change and achieve sustainable development. By the way, the climate change agenda, it's funny that they keep mentioning developing countries because the climate change agenda actually impacts developing countries the most, right? Because for them, having air conditioning is not a matter of comfort, it's a matter of life and death, right? For them, having the ability to have your own natural gas is not a matter of the gas prices being $5 or $6 versus $3 or $4, or maybe $2 or $3, or maybe $1 or $2. It's a difference between, am I going to be able to actually have a job that's 10 miles away from me or not? Which therefore means I can get food, which therefore means that my little ones, aren't starving, etc. Last year, I put forward, I is of course Xi Jinping. Last year, I put forward a global development initiative at the UN General Assembly to draw international attention to the pressing challenges faced by developing countries. The initiative is a public good open to the whole world, which aims to form synergy with the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and boost common development across the world. China stands ready to work with all partners to jointly translate the initiative into concrete actions and make sure that no country is left behind in the process. By the way, that sounds like it's encouraging. Believe me, it is a threat. No country being left behind means at the point of a gun, you will bow down to us. And if you think that's not true, just take a look at what happened in Afghanistan with the Taliban. Fourth, we need to discard Cold War mentality and seek peaceful coexistence and win-win outcomes. The Cold War's been over for 30 years. Nobody has a Cold War mentality. Anyways, our world today is far from being tranquil. Rhetorics that stroke hatred and prejudice abound. It's funny, he talks about rhetorics that stroke hatred and prejudice. And yet again, who's the world leader that has a bunch of Muslims and Falun Gong and Christians in concentration camps right now? Who's the guy who's threatening to invade Taiwan? Who's the guy who's cracking down on the freedoms of Hong Kong? Who's the guy who refuses to let Tibet be an independent country? Oh, wow, it's all Winnie the Flu. That's crazy. But, other people, not him, of course, are stroking hatred and prejudice around. Completely disgusting. Acts of containment, suppression, or confrontation arising thereof do all harm, not the least good, to world peace and security. Do we want world peace? Yes, of course we do. But anytime a world leader mentions world peace, immediately you need to understand that what they're talking about is not what you're talking about. What they're talking about is global government. What you're talking about is, world peace, because that's kind of what the words mean. Which, by the way, another thing, I hate to be that guy, but world peace is never going to happen. The second it does, quote unquote, happen, you better start being worried, because what that means is we have finally established an international government, and we're about to see the very worst Holocaust that we've ever seen. We're talking billions. History has proved time and time again that confrontation does not solve problems. Right, I wonder how we solved the Nazi problem. It only invites catastrophic consequences, like, for example, getting rid of Nazis. Anyways, I don't know. I'm just adding these commentaries. I don't know why they're popping into my head. Maybe it's my racism. Protectionism and unilateralism can protect no one except for, of course, the United States when it had a Gilded Age, when we had the most powerful economy that has literally ever existed. We had a whole bunch of protectionism and unilateralism going on there. In fact, back then, one of the main distinguishing factors between the Republican Party and the Democratic Party was the fact that the Republican Party, who was the pro-business party, wanted us to have protectionist tariffs. Now, of course, when Trump says that, he's obviously racist. I'm not a fan of Trump, by the way. I'm just saying that, anyways, you guys know what I'm saying. They ultimately hurt the interest of others as well as one's own. Even worse are the practices of hegemony and bullying. Ha! Oh, my goodness. The guy who's threatening to invade Taiwan has a problem with hegemony and bullying. Anyways, It's like that meme. You guys ever seen the meme where Stevie Wonder is like, "I may be blind, but at least I'm not black"? That's basically what the Chinese government is doing right now. Even worse are the practices of hegemony and bullying, which run counter to the tide of history. Naturally, countries have divergences and disagreements between them. Yet a zero-sum approach that enlarges one's own gain at the expense of others will not help. Acts of single-mindedly bullying or building, exclusive yards with high walls or parallel systems of enthusiastically putting together exclusive small circles or blocks that polarize the world, of overstretching the concept of national security to hold back economic technological advances of other countries, and of fanning ideological antagonism and politicizing or weaponizing economic, scientific, and technological issues will gravely undercut international efforts to tackle common challenges. Notice here, he says one of the problems here is weaponizing economic, scientific, and technological issues. I'm going to go ahead and highlight it for you guys here. One of the problems that is going to undercut international efforts here is weaponizing economic, scientific, and technological issues. But if we scroll up just a little bit in the exact same speech, in fact, let's just go ahead and do it this way. He says, of particular importance is to fully leverage vaccines as a powerful weapon. That's interesting, because the only other reference of the word weapon on this article is him saying that weaponizing economic, scientific, and technological issues will gravely undercut international efforts to tackle common challenges. This is the same freaking speech. Anyways, not that we need to be consistent, of course. Being consistent is racist. The right way forward for humanity is peaceful development and win-win cooperation. Different countries and civilizations may prosper together on the basis of respect for each other and seek common ground and win-win outcomes by setting aside differences. This is the same guy who wants to invade Taiwan, as I've already pointed out, who's threatening nuclear war with India, as we haven't pointed out yet, but is nonetheless a thing, who has boats in international waters that belong or that are threatening Japan and the Philippines and even the United States of America. But what he really wants is for us to set aside our differences. Don't pay any attention to the massive navy that he's building with the intent to potentially invade other countries. No, he's actually all for peaceful development and win-win cooperation. And you're a conspiracy theorist if you don't agree, by the way. Or a racist. Or both, maybe. You could be Alex Jones. I don't know. We should follow the trend of history, work for a stable international order, advocate common values of humanity, there's no such thing, and build a community with a shared future for mankind. I know people might hate the fact that I say there's no such thing as common values of humanity, but go to Saudi Arabia in a pair of short shorts and then ask yourself if we truly share common values. And you actually won't be able to come to the conclusion because you'll be too busy being stoned to death. We should choose dialogue over confrontation, inclusiveness over exclusion, and stand against all forms of unilateralism, protectionism, hegemony, or power politics. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, last year, the Communist Party of China celebrated the 100th anniversary of its founding. Through a century of tenacious struggle, the CPC has rallied and led the Chinese people in accomplishing remarkable achievements in the advancement of the nation and betterment of people's lives. We have realized a moderately prosperous society in all respects and won the battle against poverty. That's hilarious. Both according to plan, and found a historic solution to ending absolute poverty. So he's giving us a speech about how we should end absolute poverty, but also apparently he's already accomplished it. So you can square that circle if you like. I don't necessarily know how to do so. Oh, Cryptomaria is here. Shalom, and thank you for being here. One of our earliest fans here, actually. I very much appreciate the fact that she's still been around. Richard Neal, too, actually. A lot of you guys here have been watching since the beginning, so I appreciate you guys tremendously. Anyways, now China is marching on a new journey of building a modern socialist country in all respects. China will stay committed to pursuing high-quality development. The Chinese economy enjoys a good momentum overall. Last year, our GDP grew by around 8%, achieving the dual target of fairly high growth and relatively low inflation. Shifts in the domestic and internet. Remember, he was just talking about how inflation is too high. And Jamie Russell is also here. Shalom, and thank you for being here. He was just talking about how inflation is too high and how poverty is growing. And now he wants to convince you that, in fact, he's managed to stop it all because he's so awesome and brilliant. Shifts in the domestic and international economic environment have brought tremendous pressure, but the fundamentals of the Chinese economy, characterized by strong resilience, enormous potential, and long-term sustainability, remain unchanged. We have every confidence in the future of China's economy. Quote, the wealth of a country is measured by the abundance of its people, end quote. Excuse me. Sorry, gross, but I had to burp. Thanks to considerable economic growth, the Chinese people are living much better lives. Isn't that funny? Living much better lives while we're having people stuck in concentration camps. Again, if I was writing a James Bond villain in 1960, and I did as perfect of a job as I possibly could, and I presented the speech of that James Bond villain to you guys today, you would look at it and then look at what Xi Jinping is saying here and think to yourself, damn, Jay, you suck at writing villains. Because nobody could get as crazy as Xi Jinping is. Nobody could get as dishonest as Xi Jinping is. Man very well could be the most evil man on the entire planet. The wealth of a country is measured by the abundance of its people, he says. Thanks to considerable economic growth, the Chinese people are living much better lives. Nonetheless, we are soberly aware that to meet people's aspiration for an even better life, we still have much hard work to do in the long run. Like, I don't know, just a thought, maybe not putting people in concentration camps or threatening to invade smaller countries. Just an idea, a racist idea, don't get me wrong, but an idea. China has made it clear that we strive for more visible and substantive progress in the well-rounded development of individuals and the common prosperity of the entire population, except for those we put in concentration camps. We are working hard on all fronts to deliver on this goal, except for the concentration camp one. Sorry if it's annoying that I keep bringing that up, but it's just hilarious in a very dark and vile way, but nonetheless. The common prosperity we desire is not egalitarianism. To use an analogy, we will first make the pie bigger and then divide it properly through reasonable institutional arrangements. As a rising tide lifts all boats, everyone will get a fair share from development, and development gains will benefit all our people in a more substantial and equitable way. China will stay committed to reform and opening up. For China, reform and opening up is always a work in process. Whatever change in the international landscape, China will always hold high the banner of reform and opening up. China will continue to let the market play a decisive role in resource allocation, even though they're socialist, and so literally no, they won't, and see to it, that government better plays its role. We will be steadfast in consolidating and developing the public sector, just as we are steadfast in encouraging, supporting, and guiding the development of the non-public sector, which would be called the private sector, by the way. We will build a unified, open, competitive, and orderly market system where all businesses enjoy equal status before the law and have equal opportunities in the marketplace. All types of capital are welcome to operate in China in compliance with laws and regulations and play a positive role for the development of the country. Now, the great thing about making the laws and regulations is you can make anything in compliance with the laws and regulations. For example, if you're, stealing people's livers to sell to rich Chinese people, well, I mean, we make the laws, so we're not violating the laws by stealing your liver. Don't you see how that works? China will continue to expand high standard opening up, steadily advance institutional opening up that covers rules, managements, and standards, deliver national treatment for foreign businesses, and promote high quality Belt and Road cooperation. Now, for those who don't remember, the Belt and Road initiative is an initiative that China has started where essentially they want to build a highway from Beijing all the way to London. It's going to pass through like 57 different countries. One of those countries is Afghanistan, which is another reason why the whole Taliban thing is a very, very big deal. But we've talked about that in the past, and you can definitely see my other episodes addressing such. Where did I leave off here? Belt and Road, there it is. With the entry into force of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, or RCEP, on January 1st this year, that was 2022, of course, China will faithfully fulfill its obligations and deepen economic and trade ties with other RCEP parties. China will also continue to work for the joining of the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, or CPTPP, and the Digital Economy Partnership Agreement, or DIPA, with a view to further integrating into a regional and global economy and achieving mutual benefit and win-win results. China will stay committed to promoting ecological conservation. I gotta be honest, this one is probably the most hilarious. Partially because the fact that concentration camps are just genuinely not funny. So that's part of the reason why this particular portion and not those others is the most hilarious. But the other part of it just being that, like I said, China has literal smog storms where entire cities are blanketed with black smog, such that people drop dead of black lung walking down the street. You can find plenty of pictures of this, by the way. This is a very, very well-known thing. In fact, if I remember correctly, China actually puts more pollutants into the air than the rest of the entire world combined. That includes countries like the United States, Mexico, Great Britain, Russia, etc., right? But he's going to lead us in promoting ecological conservation. I wonder how the pandas are doing. As I have said many times, we should never grow the economy at the cost of resource depletion and environmental degradation, which is like draining a pond to get fish. Nor should we sacrifice growth to protect the environment, which is like climbing a tree to catch fish. That was pretty funny, I'm not going to lie. Guided by our philosophy that clean waters and green mountains are just as valuable as gold and silver, China has carried out holistic conservation and systemic governance in its mountains, rivers, forests, farmlands, lakes, grasslands, and deserts. We do everything we can to conserve the ecological system, intensify pollution prevention and control, and improve the living and working environment for our people. China is now putting in place the world's largest national park system. Last year, we successfully hosted COP15 to the Convention on Biological Diversity, contributing China's share to a clean and beautiful world, quote unquote. Almost done here, friends. Achieving carbon peak and carbon neutrality are the intrinsic requirements of China's own high-quality development and a solemn pledge to the international community. China will honor its word and keep working toward its goal. We have unveiled an action plan for carbon dioxide peaking before 2030, to be followed by implementation plans for specific sectors such as energy, industry, and construction. China now has the world's biggest carbon market and biggest clean power generation system. The installed capacity of renewable energy has exceeded 1 billion kilowatts, and the construction of wind and, I'm probably going to say this wrong, sorry, photovoltaic, actually I think I said that right, photovoltaic, power stations with a total installed capacity of 100 million kilowatts is well underway. Carbon peak and carbon neutrality cannot be realized overnight, which of course is fair enough. Through solid and steady steps, China will pursue an orderly phase down of traditional energy in the course of finding reliable substitution in new energy. This approach, which combines phasing out the old and bringing in the new, will ensure steady economic growth and social development. China will also actively engage in international cooperation on climate and jointly work for a complete transition to a greener economy and society. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, Davos is known as a heaven for winter sports. The Beijing Olympic and Paralympic Winter Games will open soon. We are confident that China will present a streamlined, safe, and splendid games to the world, which of course, now where we're at has already happened. The official motto for Beijing 2020 is Together for a Shared Future. Indeed, let us join hands with full confidence and work together for a shared future. Thank you. All right, so obviously we did a lot of commenting here. Richard Neal points out, did he say 100? China was not communist 100 years ago. So that is true. That is true. However, what he was talking about, just to clarify for you, Richard, what he was talking about in particular was the Chinese Communist Party. So brief history lesson for you guys. China became communist in 1949 once the Chinese Communist Party won the Civil War, the Chinese Civil War against the Kuomintang, otherwise known as the Nationalist Party, who then fled to Taiwan and established the Republic of Taiwan that we know today. So 1949 is when they actually were established as a communist country. But the Chinese Communist Party was actually founded in 1921, about 28 years before that had ever happened. So that's actually what he was referencing. It's just a brief history lesson for you guys. But you are 100% right, Richard Neal. They have not been communist for 100 years. In fact, my grandfather was born in 1947. At the time he was born, it would only be 2 years until it would occur. But at the time he was born, there was no communist China. So that's just a brief clarification there on that. There really isn't much else to say. There really isn't much else to say, except that we need to be very alert. This is the direction we are headed, friends. We are being led by literal supervillains. We are being, led by people who are sticking people in concentration camps, who have so much pollution in the air that they are creating literal smog blankets over their government or over their cities, who are bullying nations into becoming part of their hegemony, who are stealing people's organs and selling them off to the highest donor, and et cetera, and et cetera, and et cetera. These people are meeting with each other to tell all of us how all of those things are bad and we shouldn't do them. And that the only way to solve that is to have an international government where we give them more power. Xi Jinping gave this speech to the World Economic Forum. The same guys who are behind the Great Reset, the same guys who are endorsed by Pope Francis, the same guys who are endorsed by the current sitting president of the United States, if indeed there is such a mind in the president of the United States to endorse anything. And I don't even mean to be rude about that, but Joe Biden is ridiculously senile. This is where we're at on this planet. And unless we do something about it, which the number one thing we can do about it is pray for revival, this is the direction we're going. And it may even continue to be the direction we're going. Who knows? It's all God's will. But we are living in biblical times, friends. We are living in biblical times. I don't have that as my tagline for no reason. It is the facts. We are living in biblical times. Book of Revelation, Daniel 9 times. Matthew 24, end of the world, Armageddon, apocalypse kind of times. Is that the way it will continue? I don't know. We'll see. Lord willing, no. Lord willing, there are many more generations of Christians to come. Lord willing, there are many more generations of humans in general to come. But we'll see what happens. But with that, friends, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. If you liked this video, please remember to like and share this video. Please consider subscribing to the channel if you have not done so. Hit that bell to get notified every time that we go live. By the way, if you want to read this for yourself, the link to the full agenda, to the full address, has been dropped in the live chat. Definitely consider checking it out. Also, if you like this content, if you think that this is good news content, if you think that I am actually, for whatever reason, one of the news anchors out there that should be listened to, first off, I appreciate you. There's a glut of information out there, and you decided to choose me, so I appreciate that tremendously. But secondly, you can help me turn this into a full-time career by giving either to the Patreon or to the PayPal. If you give to the Patreon, it is a it is a subscription-based service. I do not have tiers, so you can give as much or as little as you like. And pretty soon we are going to have a blog, a political blog that is posted to Patreon. The way we're going to do this is we're going to actually set up a Patreon that is exclusive to the Watchdog, so it's not actually joint. Right now, my Patreon is joint, so everybody who supports my apologetics content and everybody who supports my politics content is actually ultimately supporting the same Patreon. But what we're going to go ahead and do here soon is we're going to get a Patreon account that is unique to the Synagogue News. And if you subscribe to that when we do get it, I can't guarantee you when we will get it, but if you subscribe to that, then you will get access to a political blog I'll be doing weekly, which we will be calling Blogladite, kind of keeping in with that whole Think Like a Neanderthal thing we have going on here. If you are interested in that, definitely keep that in your back pocket, but not quite yet, right? Anyways, if you guys wish to contribute, please do so either there to Patreon or one time to PayPal. I appreciate you guys tremendously. Remember to like and share the video. Questions, comments, criticisms, concerns, critiques in the live chat below. And ladies and gentlemen, if the Lord wills and tarries, we will be seeing you here soon. I want to remind you to be watchdogs. And of course, I want to say, in the face of Armageddon, will you compromise